All right, let's get into it. We're diving deep into the final chaotic years of the Soviet Union, a time when a real-life phantom was haunting the railways, leaving this trail of bodies that had the Soviet militia completely stumped. And at the center of it all, a killer who was somehow both a total monster and, believe it or not, a man capable of love.
So picture this. It's 1989. A kind of beat-up regional train is just rattling its way through the Soviet far north. It's late, most people are asleep, but for one woman on board, this trip is about to turn into an absolute nightmare.
She just steps out between the train cars, probably to get some fresh air, and then she comes rushing back, just screaming. I mean, a scream that completely shatters the silence of the night. Suddenly, everyone knows something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. And just like that, this boring, routine train ride turns into a scene of total panic and horror.
And you know what? The horror was only just getting started. By the time that train finally pulled into the next station, the body count was up to 3. A phantom was loose on that train, and all the other passengers were trapped right there with it.
So when the militia finally storms the train ready for anything, the killer's just gone, vanished. It's like they disappeared into thin air. All that's left behind is a brutal triple murder scene and this one terrifying question.
All right, so the investigation kicks off right there, in those blood-soaked train cars. The scene itself, well, it didn't give them much to go on, but what it did do was establish a pattern, and it was one of chilling efficiency and just raw brutality.
You know, the initial findings were just baffling. All 3 victims were young guys, strong construction workers on their way home with their paychecks. But get this, there were 0 signs of a struggle. None. They were just killed silently, one after another, and their pockets were all turned out. It really was like they were hunted by a ghost.
And just like that, the trail went completely cold, almost immediately. But then, another murder pops up. And at first it seems totally unrelated. But this one reveals a gruesome calling card, a signature if you will, that would start connecting a whole string of victims across the country.
So, way over in the Kirov region, we're talking hundreds of kilometers away, the body of a taxi driver, a guy named Sergei Metelkin, is found. His car is gone. So at first glance, it just looks like a carjacking that went bad. But forensics, well, they were about to uncover a really chilling link.
Okay, so the link was in the wound. And it wasn't just a stab wound. No, the killer plunged the knife deep into the victim's heart and then twisted it. This incredibly sadistic, very specific method was a perfect match to the wounds on the train victims. Right then, investigators knew. They were hunting a single killer and he was on the move.
So now they have a signature. And with that, investigators could finally start connecting the dots. And every new clue, every new crime, it all started to form this terrifying web.
And then the killer strikes again. But this time it seems he has help. They attack 2 Army veterans. One is killed with that same signature wound to the heart. The other guy, Gennady Sinitsyn, is doused in gasoline and literally set on fire. But in all that monstrous cruelty, they make one huge, critical mistake. Sinitsyn actually survives.
Now he's suffering from shock, he's got severe burns, and he has amnesia. He can't remember any faces, can't remember the details. But one tiny little memory comes to the surface. He remembers that one of the attackers spoke with this distinct, kind of lilting accent. It definitely wasn't local to the area. And that was the first real clue they had about who these killers could be.
So after this string of just horrifying attacks, the case finally gets a break, and it comes from the most unexpected place you can imagine, a prison cell. See, an inmate named Alexei Dolgov starts bragging to his cellmates about the murders. He's giving details that only the killer could possibly know. Well, someone was listening. An informant heard it all, and the entire web just started to unravel.
And Dolgov's confession? Well, it did more than just solve the crimes. It laid out the entire structure of the gang, and it introduced investigators to its leader, a man who was just a walking bundle of shocking, disturbing contradictions.
So it turns out this wasn't just some random gang. It was a family business. The leader was the middle brother, Rinat Kusenov, and everyone described him as just utterly ruthless. He's the one who recruited his old cellmate, Dolgov, and then he pulled his own younger and older brothers into this bloody operation.
And this is where we get to that bizarre duality at the heart of this killer. I mean, how can one person be both of these things? According to his accomplice, Rinat would literally scream, "Meat! Meat!" over his dying victims. And yet, this is the same guy who's deeply in love, was about to become a father, and wrote these tender notes to his brothers. A complete monster.
who was also, somehow, capable of love. So when they bring Kusanov in for questioning, he's a total wall of ice, denies everything. One of the interrogators said his stare was like a python's, just this heavy, hypnotic gaze, like he was weaving a web right through concrete. He was completely remorseless. He seemed absolutely 100% unbreakable.
Weeks of interrogation get them absolutely nowhere. So facing this total wall of silence, the investigators decide to try something unconventional, a kind of psychological Hail Mary. They find his girlfriend, Valentina, who, it turns out, has just given birth to their son, and they arrange for a meeting.
So there he is, the ruthless, cold-blooded killer, the Python, who seemed like he didn't have a soul. And he's brought face to face with his newborn son. Just the sight of this new life, the life he had created, and the future he had just thrown away, it finally shattered that wall of ice. He looked at his son, and he just cried. And then he turns to the investigators and says, "I can't anymore. I will talk."
And just like that, with Rinat Husenov's full confession, the case was basically closed. The whole gang was put on trial, which brought a formal, legal end to their absolutely terrifying reign of terror.
And the court did not hold back. It handed down the harshest sentences it could. For being the lead killers, Rinat Kusanov and Alexei Dolgov were both sentenced to death by firing squad. The other three guys, including Rinat's two brothers, they each got 15 years in a strict regime labor colony.
But justice in the collapsing Soviet Union was a complicated thing, to say the least. Not long after they were sentenced, Russia put a moratorium on the death penalty. So what happened? The death sentences for Kusanov and Dolgov were never actually carried out. Instead, they were changed to life in prison.
So officially, the gang was convicted of more than 10 murders. And the motive? What was it all for? A few cars. That's it. Cars they sold for a couple thousand rubles each. We're talking more than a dozen human lives traded for the price of a few used vehicles. It's just sickening.
And while the gang was convicted for the crimes they actually confessed to, investigators have always believed the real body count is much, much higher. And that leaves us with a pretty chilling final thought, doesn't it? How many more victims of the Kusanov gang were out there? Victims who were just never found.